अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरोन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजाता सगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पदान् सगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त श्रीराधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्रीराधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So thank you all the devotees for joining this morning, this afternoon. So we'll just have a quick recap of what we discussed last time and then we start our discussion today. So sorry I could not share the message earlier on the group for us to have a quick recap and the list of verses that we are going to cover. But you can refer to the slide deck if you have, or you can also refer to the Bhagavad Gita. And anybody would like to mention on a high level the flow or any of the points that we discussed last time. So Sujata Mataji, you have unmuted. You want to start? You want to mention any point that we discussed last time?
Yes, Prabhuji. Last time we discussed about the 9.1, that is Krishna says, fools deride me when I am in human form, as because they don't understand the transcendental knowledge. So Krishna describes the Mudas who think Krishna is coming as an ordinary human being. That's what we saw last time. And Prabhupada says that we have to take the authoritative text, that is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, to refute their philosophy. And then Krishna talked about Mahatmas, the qualities of a Mahatma.
Before we go into Mahatmas, what was the destination of such Duratmas, such fools who derived the
they will go to the lower birth. They will take the lower birth. That's the thing.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you. Yes, Mataji, go ahead with the Mahatmas.
Mahatmas, Krishna says, they always remember me because they are they know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and their activities are that they will always be glorifying Krishna, chanting, and all their activities are to worship with devotion to the Lord. And they are outside, they are always in the Daivim Prakriti. That is divine nature. That's the thing.
Thank you. And
they are called the Ananya Bhaktas.
Yes.
Thank you, Rameshwar Prabhu. And anybody else would also like to walk us through some of the qualities of such great souls, Mahatmas? Krishna calls them great souls. What are those qualities of the Mahatmas? Anybody?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, you can tell your name and then speak.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Sham. Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, the characteristics of Mahatmas we saw were like first one was surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They always surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the characteristic two was like Mahatma does not divert his attention
to
anything other than outside Krishna. And the third characteristic was Mahatma always engages in chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And characteristic 4 was they are always determined, Dhridavrataha. And characteristic 5 was they always bow down before Krishna. And sixth characteristic was they always like perpetually worship Krishna with devotion. And we also saw, Prabhu, that how one develops into Mahatma is like by the guidance of expert spiritual masters.
Thank you very much, Shama. Hare Krishna. And subsequent, anybody wants to add anything on these two, Duratmas and Mahatmas? Any other point anybody would like to share? If not, we proceed. So next part of our discussion, we discussed about those transcendentalists who worship Krishna in an indirect way. And specifically, we discussed about the hierarchy. The Mahatmas, they are the topmost. And then the four types of Sukrutinas who surrender to Lord Krishna for some material want, for some purpose. They come under the second category. And third category are the Jnanis who serve Krishna in their own different conceptions as Ekatvena, as considering Krishna same as oneself, as Prutatvena, concocting some form of the Lord like the idol worship, which is not exactly authorized as per the principles. Plus, it also includes demigod worship. So, Pratatvena, we are going to discuss this in detail today. And then we also saw in detail various types of Vishwato Mukham. Vishwato Mukham is how Krishna manifests himself in different elements of the yajna practice, like the offering and all. So that also we saw in detail various elements of yajna in which Lord manifests himself and how the Vishwato Mukham devotees understand Krishna in his universal form through these various elements and they worship this form of the Lord. So now in this discussion today, next set of verses, text 19 onwards, we'll be discussing about one second. We'll be discussing about the Prutatvena devotees of Lord Krishna. Yeah. So these are the devotees, specifically the point that is highlighted by Lord Krishna in the subsequent verses, how these devotees approach various devatas, various demigods, and engage themselves in demigod worship. So we'll start with the verse first, 9:20. This is text 20, chapter 9. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, if you are not speaking, devotees can please mute so that others can hear. Text 20. Traividyamam somapah puta papa yagyair ishva swargatim prarthayante te punyam asadya surendra lokam ashnanti divyan divideva bhogan. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly, purified of sinful reactions. They take birth on the pious heavenly planets of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. So the result of such the destination, the desired destination of such transcendentalists who are Krutatvena, they worship the Devatas to try and attain the heavenly planets to enjoy the godly delights based on their pious activities, based on the results of their pious credits. And the what happens after the results of those pious credits get exhausted, after they have resided on the heavenly planets, such devata worshippers, such demigod worshippers, again they need to come back to the earthly planets. So demigod worshippers, it is mentioned that although they are worshipping various devatas, demigods based on their own conception, ultimately they worship Lord Krishna only, but in an indirect way. Why? Because they study the Vedas, and we see that in Bhagavad Gita 15 chapter, Lord Krishna mentions that the ultimate goal of the understanding, the studies of the Vedas is to know him. Vedascha sarve aham eva vedyaha. So they study Vedas, but their understanding of the Vedas is to get some material benefit out of it, including, and they also want to enjoy having, consuming, drinking the Soma juice, seeking heavenly planets and the godly delights on those planets. And although the actual Trivedis, actual Pratatvenas, those who take shelter of the Vedas, they understand that the goal of all the Vedas is to engage in Lord Krishna's devotional service by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and cultivating the knowledge of Krishna. But many of others Pratatvena who are guided by the enjoyment mentality, they want to attain the heavenly planets, and they reach there by practicing the various kinds of sacrifices to reach the planets of the Devatas. And these Prutaktvenas, those who want to enjoy the heavenly delights and the facilities of enjoyment in those planets, they are mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the purport as the official student of the Vedas. Official students means they are studying the rituals given in the Vedas with the selfish motive to gain the material benefit out of it. They are not understanding the essence of those Vedic instructions. So that's why they are mentioned as the official students. Excuse me. They are mentioned as the official students of the Vedas who are interested only in sacrifices to the Devatas for material benefits. They have not attained the perfection of knowledge, which is to know the source of all, the beginning, the source of all the entities, Janmadi Yasya Yataha, Asya Yataha. And only benefits such official students of the Vedas achieve is they get purified of the lower modes and they get elevated to the heavenly planets where the facilities for enjoyments are much, much higher compared to the earthly planets, and they get a very long duration of life and better sense gratification. So in the next part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada compares this going to the heavenly planets just like a Ferris wheel. So here the photo shown is that of a Singapore flyer, where a person goes in this Ferris wheel, he goes up, and again the Ferris wheel, as it moves, the person has to come down. So similarly, these Devata worshippers, they come back to earth after exhausting their results of their pious credits. They get into the cycle of birth and death after exhausting the pious deeds. So we'll read from the purport for 9.21, in which Srila Prabhupada writes, "He who fails to understand Krishna, the cause of all causes, becomes baffled about achieving the ultimate goal of life, and is thus subjected to the routine of being promoted to the higher planets, and then again coming down as if situated on a Ferris wheel, which sometimes goes up and sometimes comes down. The purport is that instead of being elevated to the spiritual world, from which there is no longer any possibility of coming down, one simply revolves in the cycle of birth and death on higher and lower planetary systems." So Srila Prabhupada very emphatically states that these people, their goal of material enjoyment is frustrated after a while, because every time they go high up and enjoy the enjoyment, the godly delights there, as Srila Prabhupada uses the word godly delights, they again have to come back to this earth, suffer, and again engage into the fruitive activities. And I request devotees, if in case Prabhuji joins, please do ping and let me know also in case Prabhuji joins. And conclusion of this Devata worship, Srila Prabhupada mentions for such Kritak Venas is that an intelligent person, as some of the Kritak Venas do know, that one should better take up to the spiritual world to enjoy an eternal life which is full of bliss and knowledge, and never having to return to this miserable material existence again. So this is the main conclusion which the Kritak Venas need to come to be able to get out of this cycle of birth and death from this Ferris wheel. And what is the policy of these heavenly delights? What is the policy of having one's destination as going to these heavenly planets as one's goal? One comes back to the earth, the cycle of birth and death repeats. Hare Krishna, sorry. Then in the next text, Lord Krishna describes now the Devata worshippers are covered, and their reciprocation with Krishna is also covered. How they reciprocate with Krishna in terms of conducting various sacrifices for the Devatas for getting the heavenly delights. Krishna fulfills their enjoyment desires for enjoyment, and then again they have to come back to the material world. But now what happens to the devotees? How does Lord Krishna reciprocate with the desires and endeavor of his devotees? That is mentioned in the next verse, which is 9:22. And this is again a very famous verse in Bhagavad Gita. So we should try to highlight and by heart this. 9:22. Ananyas chintayanto ma ye jana paryupasate tesham nitya viyuktana yogakshemam vahamyaham. Translation. But those who always worship me, always worship Lord Krishna with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form. To them, I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So this verse, Lord Krishna explains the complete protection that he provides to the Ananya Bhaktas, to the pure devotees who are always engaged in exclusive devotion, meditating on Lord Krishna's transcendental form. So in contrast to the Devata worshippers, the Pruthak-Venas, the pure devotees of Lord Krishna, they have infallible protection directly from Krishna. And we will see why this protection is called infallible in the subsequent verses. And this type of protection is not available by the strength of one's pious activities, pious credits. And for such direct worshippers of Lord Krishna, who are the pure devotees, who are worshipping Krishna in exclusive devotion, Krishna carries what these devotees lack in their life for conducting their spiritual practices, and whatever such devotees possess in their life, which is conducive for the practice of spiritual life, Krishna personally preserves what they have. So Srila Prabhupada writes in this regard, one who is unable to live even for a moment without Krishna consciousness cannot but think of Krishna 24 hours a day, being engaged in devotional service by hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshipping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, rendering other services, cultivating friendship with Lord Krishna, and surrendering fully unto the Lord. Such activities are all auspicious and full of spiritual potencies, which make the devotee perfect in self-realization. That means even when those activities, Srila Prabhupada states at other places that there are two types of pure devotees, one who have already attained the state of purity in their heart and one who are trying for that goal. They are also considered as pure devotees from the eyes of Krishna, because such activities, while they are practiced, even when the ultimate perfection is, say, not yet attained, these activities are mentioned as full of spiritual potencies and are all auspicious. And these activities make the devotee perfect even in their practicing stage, in their practicing stage of self-realization. So that such a devotee's only desire is to achieve the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the last line of this verse, Lord Krishna mentions Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. So this is a very famous line which is also used by various organizations in their advertisements. So in this line, Lord Krishna implies by the word yoga, what does yoga mean? That while a devotee is in the practicing stage, the devotee approaches Krishna without difficulty. That means Krishna personally helps such a devotee to attain Krishna consciousness by the yoga practice. And by the yoga practice, it doesn't necessarily mean the Hatha yoga and other type of Ashtanga yoga. In this particular context, Lord Krishna means the Bhakti yoga. So for such a devotee, Krishna personally helps him to attain this level of the yoga perfection in Bhakti yoga. And Kshemam means the merciful protection of the Lord. That when such a devotee attains the platform of being fully Krishna conscious, the Lord personally protects such a devotee from falling down to the miserable conditional life. Because we know that this world has been designed so tricky way by the material nature, by the energies of the Lord, that even the perfected living entities, sometimes they have problems and there is a chance of falling down even from the elevated platform. But Krishna here specifically grants protection to the completely surrendered souls, that because of their surrender unto the Supreme Lord, Krishna offers them full protection from falling down from the elevated platform of devotional service. So if any devotee want to add anything on this verse, this is very important. You can please raise your hand and we proceed. Sorry, Ramesha Prabhu, I just saw your message. Let me make it presentation mode. So if any devotee want to add anything or comment anything on this particular discussion, we can have or we can proceed. All right, so we move to the next verse. So one fallacy of the Devata worshippers, we saw that they have to come back in this Ferris wheel of cycle of birth and death. So second kind of problem with the Devata worship, and here this is one of the verses, next text number 23, where Krishna is giving his personal opinion, black and white. He is not keeping anything gray in terms of what should be the priority of a spiritual practitioner in terms of conducting his spiritual practices. What should be his goal, what he should do, what he should not do. Krishna is being very emphatic in this verse. So we'll read this verse first. येपि अन्य देवता भक्ता यजन्ते श्रद्धयान्वितः तेपि माम एव कौन्तेय यजन्ति अविधि पूर्वकम. So in this verse, the last word avidhi purvakam is very, very significant. 923 translation. Those who are devotees of other gods, namely the devatas, and who worship them with faith, actually worship only me, that is only Krishna, O son of Kunti. But they do so in a wrong way. So Krishna specifically uses the word avidhi purvakam to say that their worship is not the right way, but it is done in a wrong way, because they don't understand that ultimately demigod worship is going to lead to a temporary results, and even those results are not good for the living entity. And Srila Prabhupada elaborately explains this point in the purport through few examples that we will see. So first of all, the Devata worshippers, the demigod worshippers, they lack the knowledge of Krishna's supremacy, and that's why they worship the Devatas. It is a sign of less intelligence, because such a worship is offered to Krishna only. They don't know that ultimately Krishna being Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam, that he is being the ultimate enjoyer of all the sacrifices, all the austerities that one performs, even the sacrifices rendered to the Devatas. Ultimately, the fruit is offered to Lord Krishna, but it is offered in an indirect way, in a Vidhi Purvakam platform. And Srila Prabhupada gives various analogies to explain why such a worship is called incomplete or improper. So first example Srila Prabhupada gives is just like pouring water on the leaves and branches. It doesn't it doesn't nourish the plant unless one waters the root of the plant or the tree. Similarly, feeding different parts of the bodies and not feeding the stomach doesn't nourish the body. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada, and third example he gives is a very, very day-to-day and practical example to explain, and he uses the word bribe. So you can imagine giving bribe is definitely an illegitimate, uh, illegal thing. So even the Devata worship from the point of view of absolute bhakti is not the right way. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, the demigods are, so to speak, different officers and directors in the government of the Supreme Lord. One has to follow the laws made by the government, not by the officers or directors. Similarly, everyone is to offer his worship to the Supreme Lord only. That will automatically satisfy different officers and directors of the Lord. The officers and directors are engaged as representatives of the government, and to offer some bribe to the officers and directors is illegal. This is stated here as a vidhi purvakam. So this is the most direct reference to the Devata worship compared to the rendering of the pure devotional service to Lord Krishna that is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. But obviously we have to be very careful. We cannot necessarily put it black and white with those people who still don't have that much faith, that much conviction in the process of devotional service, so as not to hurt them in a wrong way. So the conclusion is Krishna does not approve the unnecessary worship of the devatas by the transcendentalists. Krishna expects those Prithakvena to fall under the category of the subcategory of the Prithakvenas who understand the real goal of Vedas as rendering of devotional service to Lord Krishna. So Krishna does not approve Devata worship. So if anybody wants to add anything, you can raise your hand or else we can proceed. Yes, Shama Gopika Mataji, Hare Krishna.
And
Hare Krishna, one devotee can speak at one time so that we can hear. So Shama Gopika Mataji, you can speak.
there is some noise. It's okay. Now it is not. Okay. Prabhuji, this one is like very sensitive topic.
Yeah, yes,
When we meet, like some people have this notion that ISKCON, ISKCON is something like why they always worship only Krishna. All gods are, all demigods are gods. So they sometimes it becomes very difficult to explain them.
So typically what I have heard senior devotees mention, Mataji, like even in the level 1 course, when people have this query, whenever we are discussing, say, 10th chapter where Krishna shows Vishwarup containing all the devatas, we clearly tell them that this is the position, but we are not asking you to give up what they are doing. Just add the worship of Lord Krishna, including chanting of the holy names, to their practice. Definitely, we don't tell them that it is avidhi purvakam, that it is not correct. So yeah, this is a very strong way, and even I wrote that point black and white only for this group. So this is really not to be mentioned as it is to those people who have not yet got that conviction. I agree with you, Manish.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, but this is written in the Bhagavad Gita. Every interpretation of Bhagavad Gita must be saying this only.
Yeah, so interpretation is definitely the same, Mataji, just that we have to mention the point according to the faith of the person who is listening. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also mentions at other places that we should not disturb the faith of a person, that because even the Devata worshippers are indirectly worshipping Krishna, rather than we reducing the possibility of they taking up to the path of bhakti, we should not hurt their faith and reduce that possibility. Chance.
Okay,
So
Prabhuji, thank you.
yeah, we wait for them to come to the level, and we are encouraging them. We are not asking them that you don't do Krishna. We are definitely telling them to chant Hare Krishna, to do this thing simultaneously. And once their faith matures, then they can understand this one. Murli Prabhuji, you want to say something?
Can I say something?
Adish Prabhu, yes, just let Murli Prabhu, because Prabhuji had unmuted himself. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji,
Yes.
yes, these Devatas, the called demigods, actually, I was reading in one place, they says that Devata means a shining one. So,
Yeah.
as we know, all of us are souls. So, in that particular case, these are souls which are shining souls, and they are at elevated level than most of us. Okay,
Yes,
and then
definitely.
what you right last part was very correct. Is that we should not discourage people, those who are doing the demigod worship, because they are having a different set of knowledge than those who are worshiping Krishna directly, because they are at a higher plane. Yeah, from that perspective, it is very important that we should allow everyone to worship the way they want to worship, because ultimately it goes to Krishna. That is my.
Yes, Prabhu, very, very much true and totally agree. In fact, in some places, even in Srimad Bhagavatam, recently I was reading in 9 Canto that Devatas are such powerful personalities. In some cases, there have been instances of even they being able to prolong the life, which is the prerogative of only few personalities, specifically Krishna. The Devatas were able to prolong the life of a personality so as to help him in devotional service. So they are definitely empowered representatives. And even Namanishta Prabhu has been also very emphatic on this point that we should never ever in our thought discussions should belittle their position, should disrespect them in any way. Thank you, Murli Prabhu. Bharati Mataji, yes, Mataji.
So yes, we have been discussing this topic since the day one, I think from the beginning only, that with ISKCON, you say that worship Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. However, when we go through the Vedas, when we go through Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, everywhere, it is very, very clearly known that yes, Krishna is the only one Lord that we need to be worshipping. However, when we discussed about the faith and whatever we have been doing for so many years, like if I am 70 years, I have been taught to say, worship Shiva, right? For example. Now today, if I just stop worshipping Shiva and just worship Krishna, it doesn't happen. Even if you try your level based, it does not happen. Automatically, you go and say Om Namah Shivaya and that Trambakam Yajamaya, whatever those mantras you have been chanting. Now, I had asked that question to Nishta Das as well, Prabhuji, and the reply that I got was that once you are really in Krishna consciousness, what you will do is you will consider or you will look at Shiva as Krishna only. So any demigod that you are trying to pray, you try to find Krishna in that demigod and pray. That might help us in knowing and understanding more on K, right, the Krishna.
Thank you. Thank
This
you.
was, yeah. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any other devotee? Santosh Prabhu, you can unmute.
Audio now unmuted alert.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandot
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna. Dandos. Yes.
Prabhuji, I'm not opposing any of the verses. Please do not take it otherwise.
Yes.
I just want to, for my understanding, I just want to ask this question. Though it is said that demigod worship is indirectly Krishna worship, if we want to go into details, how this is indirect worship of Krishna?
Yeah. So the last verse of the 5th chapter, Krishna mentioned Bhuktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvalokam Maheshwaram. So the vidhi, the process for attaining the heavenly planets, in the previous verse we discussed, in the purport we can see it is through conducting of the various sacrifices for the devatas, meeting those qualifying criteria and then attaining that goal. So we see from Bhagavad Gita that any sacrifice we perform for any of these devatas, ultimately the enjoyer of the fruits of the sacrifice is Lord Vishnu. So Krishna that way is definitely receiving this worship, but it is being performed in an indirect way, not directly to Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu, but through his empowered representatives, the devatas. So this is my small understanding, Prabhuji. Any other devotees also want to? Aishwarya Mataji, you want to mention anything in this regard? Aishwarya Subhadra Mataji. So is this okay, Santosh Prabhu?
Yeah, Prabhu, this is perfectly fine. Yeah,
Radhika, yes. Radhika Mataji, you wanted to say something?
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu, I'm just
Krishna.
sharing a very similar experience and question which was asked during Preeti Prema Kishori Devidas Mataji's thing. So I can just share what she
Yes.
told.
Yes.
So I'm just giving her verbatim version. So this is about the first question which Mataji had. What about Shiva? And NND Prabhu always tell chodna nahi hai, jodna hai. So nobody is telling to drop off whichever God which we've been praying, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 60 years. So we are just telling, let's include Krishna in the prayers, one. And second thing is, whatever, Prabhu has now put in the presentation, very clearly says that all the Devatas and demigods, whatever you pray, see, we cannot think of one God as another God. For example, he is presenting. I cannot assume, okay, today Janaki Mataji is presenting. I cannot impersonate him. No, he's only presenting. Prabhu is presenting, so I will think Prabhu only is presenting. Same way, if we are praying to Lord Shiva, it means we are praying to Shiva. But what is it we can pray? We can pray to Shiva that, Shiva, please show me the direction, because the direction is also shown by them only, right? So our thought of praying Shiva itself is given. So what is it Bhagavad Gita is telling is, don't have a business transaction with any God. Right. So if you are going to pray Shiva or any other God, we can always tell, oh, please give us, our knowledge so that we can go in the right devotional service. Instead of telling, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of coconuts if my wish gets fulfilled. So there we are having a barter system. So we are believing in God, but for our material benefit. But what are we trying to connect is spiritual advancement. And just to add, Dhruva also had material interest, right? Arthati. So he was, Arthati. So basically he wanted wealth, but he did go and approach Krishna because his great grandfather was Brahma. He could have gone there, but he went to Krishna. So Krishna gave him the wealth. He gave him Dhruva Nachatram, he gave him the kingdom, but he purified him. So that's the difference between any god. And we are not looking down on any Devata because they are all great devotees of Vishnu. So we are trying to tell that let's understand the position of the Devata and then pray. And just to add one more from Brahma Samhita, Pulyar, that is Ganesha, sings Yatpada Pallavi Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samaye Ganadira. So what does he mean? He means Vignam Vigatum Alamasya Jagatrayasya. Please remove the obstacles and give me the power, Govinda, for me to pray, for me to help my devotees, your devotees. So to answer the second question, Prabhu, another Prabhu had asked, right? So the second question is, the demigods, devatas themselves are requesting power from Krishna to do. So any yagna you do, right? So I go and pray Ganesha, I want devotional service. Ganesha will be more than happy. So any devotional service we do. And also Mataji told, Om Namah Shivaya, fine. Om. So Om is pranayama mantra, which means Krishna. O represents Krishna. M, A-U-M. M represents Radha Rani. And U represents us, which is a Jivatma. So even unknowingly, we are doing this. And we had an experience where Ganesha Puja also, they finally use the word Krishnarpanam. So we may not notice this. Any mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Suklam Bharadam. So everything starts with Krishna, just that we don't know. Therefore, when we are praying any demigod, we will pray consciously that it is a devata only, but just that we will pray them not for a material benefit, but for progression in spiritual path. Prabhu, I hope, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
I just thought
this is perfect, Mataji. No issues.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, can I just add one more point on this?
Yes, Murli Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, when you do the mantra pushpam also, yeah, it is mantra pushpam is there for before every puja. Yes, and in the mantra pushpam, we always chant the names of various forms of Vishnu, like Achyuta, Achyuta, and then you finally end with Sri Krishna. Okay,
Yeah.
Hare Sri Krishnaya, and then there you say Sri Krishna Parabrahma Swarupine Namah, and that is a key point. Sri Krishna is the reflection of the Parabrahma. So that is also comes up through the whole point that it is the one God that is Krishna, or one force which is called Krishna, and that is what is the reflection of that is Parabrahma. Reflection of Parabrahma is Krishna. That's exactly. The Mataji has just put the same thing in saying that in every puja you see that every puja mantra pushpam is there, and every mantra pushpam Krishna is also worked. That's just wanted to add one point there. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Murli Coach. Hare Krishna. So we proceed, and in terms of limitations of the English language, they are there for few words, that even Srila Prabhupada mentions that some of the words from Sanskrit, they don't have an exact one-to-one synonym in English. Like say, for example, avatar, reincarnation is not the completely perfect, but that is the best that is available. Similarly, for the devatas, demigods is what we mentioned in English, but devatas is more appropriate. So just that in English we don't have a better word to translate, so that's why it has been used. So yeah, we should not consider these words as disrespectful or anything less than what their position is. So we proceed with
Hare
this.
Krishna, Pran Prabhu.
Hare Krishna
To
Devi.
update you about NND Prabhuji.
Yes,
He has
Mataji.
a network issue. He cannot attend today. We will continue.
Okay, Mataji.
Hare
Hare Krishna. So we proceed. Text 24. Aham hi sarva yajnana bhokta cha prabhur eva cha natu mam abhijananti tatvena taschavanti te. Translation: I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. So here Krishna is establishing and reinforcing his position as the enjoyer and master of all the sacrifices one can render. So demigod worshippers, after great endeavor to follow the Vedas, they are mentioned as three Vedas. They simply fall down to material existence and do not achieve the desired goal. Desired goal means having a perpetual enjoyment. They have to come back to the material world after the exhaustion of the pious credits, because they do not know Krishna as the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. So Krishna here is saying, those who do not recognize my transcendental nature fall down. Fall down means having to come to this material world again and again. And Vedas recommend different types of yagyas. Yagyas, as we know the meaning of this word from the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it means Vishnu. So the famous verse from 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada quotes, Yagyarthat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha tat artham karma kaunteya mukta sangha param raje. So ultimately all the yagyas are meant for the benefit, for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. And any work that is to be performed, it should be performed as a sacrifice for Lord Vishnu, so that one is not bound by the action cycle of actions and reactions. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, for the satisfaction of Vishnu, and in that way you will always remain free from the bondage. So Srila Prabhupada states how the goal of the Varnashram is to ultimately also please Lord Vishnu. So Devata worship is for temporary benefit. Therefore, the Devata worshippers, they fall down and do not achieve the desired goal of having to enjoy perpetually, eternally. Less intelligent people take to this path. So we already discussed on this. So if there are no more questions on this topic, we can proceed to the last part of the purport. So purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, even if one has material desires, better to worship the Supreme Lord. As Radhika Mataji very nicely said, that we should definitely respect all the devatas based on their exalted position, but we should not have business transactions with them, that I offer you this worship, you grant me this material result in return. Even if we have the material desires, it is better to worship the Supreme Lord, although that type of devotional service is not considered as pure devotion, but it will still help the 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 worshipper, like it happened in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. One will thus achieve the desired result. So there is a famous verse which comes in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desires, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So Krishna will fulfill the desire after purifying the heart of the devotee, so that that fulfillment does not affect the devotee in a negative way, his progress in devotional service. So in any case, even if one is full of material desires, we should still approach Krishna and keep our dealings with the devatas in the form of respect without having any material desires from them. So then we proceed to the next verse, which is the last verse in this section, text 25. Then we move to the next section of this chapter. Aham hi sarva yagya, sorry, this is text 25. Yanti deva vrata devan, pitrun yanti pitruvrata, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti mat yajino pisma. Translation: those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth amongst such beings. And those who worship me, Lord Krishna, will live with Lord Krishna. So this verse refutes the philosophy yato mat tato tat. So this Srila Prabhupada used to mention very often in his classes, and this is by a very famous Mayavadi philosopher of modern times. So this particular verse refutes the philosophy that whatever way, whatever path of worship one adopts, one would ultimately reach the same goal. So that is not the fact. Here Krishna is very clearly mentioning the worshippers of the devatas will go to the planets of the devatas. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning various yogic sacrifices which are mentioned in the Vedas, like Darsha Paurnamasi process in Karmakanda rituals, which is recommended in the Vedas to go to the moon and the sun planets. Similarly, the worshippers of the Pitras, the ancestors, they go to the planet of the ancestors, and worshippers of the ghost, they go to the planet of the ghost. And Srila Prabhupada mentions this type of worship, like the rituals of the black magic and all, which sometimes people misunderstand them also a form of spirituality. But Srila Prabhupada mentioned that this is clearly a material type of worship, nothing to do with the spiritual practices, and these practitioners go ultimately to the planets of the ghost and the such spirits. And similarly, those who worship Krishna go to Krishna's planet, namely Goloka, Krishnaloka, or Vaikuntha. And what is the role of Krishna consciousness movement in this? It provides a sublime process of simply chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and going back home, back to Godhead. Devotional service can take one to Krishna's planet. And as we saw in the last to last verse, the destination of such devotees attaining the Krishna planet is a permanent. They don't have to come back to this material world again and again. So if any devotees have any thoughts, any point they want to share on this, we can discuss and we can move to the next section. Before that, Devika Mataji, is it okay if we have 5 minutes kirtan by devotees before we move to the next? Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. And before that, if devotees want to mention any point or comment on this, you can raise your hand. If not, we can have a short kirtan before moving to the next section.
Prabhu, just request all the devotees to mark their attendance.
Yes.
I have posted the link. Yeah.
Okay. Mataji. So any devotee would like to volunteer to sing a bhajan or kirtan? Divya Rukmini Mataji, yes Mataji, you have unmuted. You want to sing?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. You want to share your screen? I can stop sharing.
No,
Or
Prabhu.
I can open the song from here.
Yeah, Prabhu.
Let me open 1 second.
1 second. Yeah, Prabhu, you can open that. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu.
Sure.
Doya kar more. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu. Doya kar more. Toma bina ke dayalu jagat samsare. Toma bina ke dayalu jagat samsare. Padida pavana hedu tava avadara. Padida pavana hedu tava avadara. Mosama padida prabhu na pai peyara. Mosama padida prabhu na pai peyara. Aha prabhu nityananda premananda sukhi kripa palokana karo ami bhor dukhi. Doya karo Sridhapadi Advaita Gosai. Doya karo Sridhapadi Advaita Gosai. Tava kripa bale pai Chaitanya Nitai. Tava kripa bale pai Chaitanya Nitai. Aha Swarup Sanadana Rupa Raghunatha. Aha Swarup Sanadana Rupa Raghunatha. Bhakta Juga Shri Jivaha Prabhu Lokanatha. Bhakta Juga Shri Jivaha Prabhu Lokanatha. Doya karo Shri Acharya Prabhu Srinivasa. Doya karo Shri Acharya Prabhu Srinivasa. Rama Sangat. Prabhu, can you scroll the screen up? Ramachandra Sankamage Narottama Dasa. Ramachandra Sankamage Narottama Dasa. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Doya karo more. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Doya karo more. Toma bina ke doyalu jagat samsare. Toma bina ke jayalu jagat samsare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna,
Divine
Mataji.
voice, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, can you just post the link in the chat? This
Okay.
song link. Yeah.
Okay. So now we start with the last section of this particular chapter, chapter number 9, and we won't be able to conclude the whole of this last section, but we will cover it to a logical conclusion, and then we proceed in the next. So we'll cover till text 28, and then rest we do the conclusion in the next discussion. So glories of devotional service to Krishna, Krishna Bhakti. So the link to the previous section, in the previous section, we saw that how Lord Krishna mentioned different types of transcendentalists and how based on the faith and the object of worship these transcendentalists have, either as Ekatvena, as considering oneself same as God, as Prithakvena, as concocting some form, or worshipping the Devatas, as Vishwato Mukham, as accepting the universal form of the Lord and worshipping Him through various elements in this world, in the sacrifices, how various devotees attain various destinations. So now in the last portion of this particular chapter, which is entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge, Lord Krishna establishes and literally pleads all of us to take up to the direct devotional service, pure devotional service to himself. So Krishna, after having established himself as the enjoyer of all sacrificial offerings and different types of worshippers, now different types of worships, not worshippers, now encourages us to make the correct choice. Through these verses, Krishna pleads us to choose the right path to become his exclusive devotees, Kevala Bhakta, Ananya Bhakta, which is the highest perfection of life. And practical application of this particular section, worship of Lord Krishna is superior to all worships that we have seen, because Supreme Lord takes direct interest in the life of his devotees. Understanding truth about Krishna, his devotees, and their intimate relationships, one should absorb himself in Krishna consciousness. And the most essential quality of bhakti, or pure devotional service, which stands out in these verses, is that the Lord personally reciprocates with his devotees, bringing them closer to him. And we will see the details of how Krishna interferes in a positive way in the life of his devotees to bring them closer to him. So the first verse of this section 926, which is again a very famous verse, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yo me bhaktya prayachati Tat aham bhakti uparutam Ashnami prayatat manaha. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. So the gist of this verse, the essence of this verse is Lord Krishna is giving a direct information after having established his position as the supreme enjoyer, as the enjoyer of all sacrificial offerings, and as the primeval Lord and real object of sacrificial offerings. He is now revealing his desire on what can be offered to him, what is his preference, and what cannot be offered to Lord Krishna. That also Srila Prabhupada details out in the purport. So sign of an intelligent person is one who engages in Krishna's loving service to achieve the permanent bliss in abode for achieving the eternal happiness in the spiritual abode, that is Krishna Loka. And bhakti is universal and it's very easy to perform, where only qualification that is required to perform the bhakti, as we saw in the previous type of practices, including in the various yoga practices, Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, there are so many severe restrictions, there are so many rules and regulations which the person need to qualify himself or herself to be able to practice those processes. Whereas in case of devotional service, only qualification is to attain the level of pure devotional platform, which is not dependent on any material qualification. No other qualification is required, and this process can be attempted by even the poorest of the poor, no matter where one is or in what position one is situated in. So we proceed further in the same verse. So when bhakti, it is compared to the other processes of the transcendental, for the transcendentalist, it is the simplest process, and at the same time it provides one the highest perfectional stage of devotional practice, that is attaining the lotus feet of Krishna, attaining Krishna Prem. And Krishna wants only the loving service and nothing more, irrespective of the quantity or type of object. Like here, specifically Krishna is mentioning the objects which are possible to be offered for any person in any status of life without any extra endeavor. Krishna is mentioning a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water. So, but no offering is accepted by Krishna, how may ever big it may be, from a non-devotee, because Lord is self-sufficient and is not in need of anything. As we see through this famous example of Duryodhana inviting Krishna to his home, to his palace for a very big feast offering, and Vidura inviting Krishna to his very modest residence, and Krishna deciding to go to Vidura's place and not visiting Duryodhana's, because of Duryodhana being a non-devotee and Vidura being a great devotee of the Lord. So Krishna is really not in need of anything except accepting the love and devotion of the devotee. So Srila Prabhupada stresses in the purport the importance of the word bhakti, which is mentioned twice in this verse. Yome bhaktya prayachati and tat aham bhakti uparatam. So bhakti is mentioned twice in this verse to declare emphatically that this is the only means to approach Krishna. No other qualification, whether one is a Brahmana, a rich person, a scholar, or a philosopher, none of these conditions are a prerequisite, or none of these conditions are sufficient to convince Krishna to accept our offering if the love or devotion is lacking. None of these conditions can induce the Lord to accept any offering unless one offers it with love and devotion. And Srila Prabhupada mentions bhakti is not causal. Causal means something which has a cause and an effect. So it is an eternal process, and it is a direct action of service unto the absolute whole. That means that only devotional service can give rise to the devotional service. No material endeavor, no material effort can qualify a person to perform devotional service. So it is mentioned as not causal. It doesn't have any separate cause than itself. So in the next part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada stresses what can be offered to Krishna and what cannot be offered. So the prohibitive items. So this is also asked many a times by people taking up devotional service, that I do XYZ, which is not mentioned here. Can I offer those things also to Krishna? To this, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, If one wishes to engage in devotional service to the Supreme in order to be purified and reach the goal of life, the transcendental loving service to the Lord, then one should find out what the Lord desires of him. One who loves Krishna will give him whatever Krishna wants, and he would avoid offering anything which is undesirable or unasked. Srila Prabhupada uses the word unasked, which Krishna has not asked. We should not offer that thing. Thus, meat, fish, and eggs should not be offered to Krishna. If he desired such things as offerings, he would have said so, like we see in the so many other Puranas for other type of worships, that these items are mentioned, but for Krishna worship these items are not mentioned. Vegetables, grains, fruits, milk, and water are the proper foods for human beings and are prescribed by Lord Krishna himself. Whatever else we eat cannot be offered to Krishna, since he will not accept it. Thus, we cannot be acting on the level of loving devotion if we offer such foods. So Krishna has mentioned here very, very black and white clear what he can accept, and all those things thankfully are at a very simple level which anybody can manage to afford and offer to Krishna. And why offer all these items to Krishna? Srila Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavad Gita 3:13. Sri Krishna explains that only the remains of the sacrifice are purified and fit for consumption by those who are seeking advancement in life and release one from the clutches of material entanglement. Those who do not make an offering of their food, according to Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is mentioning in the same verse 3:13, they are simply eating only sin. In other words, their every mouthful is simply deepening their involvement in the complexities of material nature. So this famous verse comes in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna mentions Yagya Shishta Santo Muchante Sarva Kilbishe Bhunjate te Twagam Papa Ye Pachantya Atma Karanat. So those who are consuming any foodstuffs which are for Atma Karanat means for self satisfaction, for gratifying one's own senses. Such peoples are consuming Bhunjate Tvagam Papa. Agam means most severe kind of sin they are consuming. Those people who are not offering the foodstuffs to Yagya and partaking the resultant offerings made to the Yagya as Prasadam. So for such people who are consuming the food only for their self-satisfaction without offering it to Krishna, they are consuming sinful activities. And such sinful activities will entangle the person in the clutches of material entanglement. And what should be one's proper attitude while offering these items to Lord Krishna? Most important element in preparation, serving, and offering of such food items to Lord Krishna is we should offer them with love. We should prepare and offer them with love. And this verse refutes the impersonalist conception of the philosophers who sometimes tend to deny Lord Krishna's form, who cannot comprehend this verse because they maintain the absolute truth is without any senses. Krishna does not have any form according to them. Whereas a devotee's understanding is Krishna has senses and his senses are interchangeable. That means even in Brahma Samhita we sing, what is that verse? Angani yasya sakalain driyavratti manti, that one sense, one part of the body of Krishna can perform the function of any other part, any other sense. So similarly, it is explained by Srila Prabhupada in the purport example that Lord impregnates the living entities into the material nature just by his glance, just by looking at the material nature. Similarly, it is explained by Srila Prabhupada in the purport that once Krishna hears the devotees' words of love in offering of these items to Lord Krishna, his hearing of those words is totally identical with his accepting and personally eating and actually tasting those foodstuffs that we are offering, provided they are in this category. And who can understand Krishna's acceptance of offering in devotion? Only the devotees who accept Krishna as he describes himself in Bhagavad Gita, meaning one who accepts the omnipotent form of the Lord knowing that Krishna can perform the function of eating even when he hears our prayers, that devotees can understand this process of accepting. Without interpretation, one who understands Krishna as he reveals himself in Bhagavad Gita, without any interpretation, such a person can understand the supreme absolute truth, can eat food and also enjoy it. So a devotee does not have any doubt whether Krishna accepts our offerings. So is there any comment, any point on this particular verse before we proceed? Devotees can raise their hand if you have any point to share. Yes, Bharati Mataji, Hare Krishna.
So I was attending the Bhagavatam class that happens in the morning at 5:30 or 6, whatever. And this point came up. So Prabhuji explained that for making food as prasadam, it should start from beginning to end. Starts from beginning means you should buy it with love, with your selection. Then you should have the proper cleanliness. You should even cut to make the food with love, with to full consciousness that you are making it for Krishna as prasadam. And then also, like I think even in most of the temples also, the food that is supposed to be offered to God is made in very clean and pious area by pious people and all that. So he explained that you should, really speaking, right from A to Z, you should do every step of offering very nicely, very neatly, very cleanly, with love, with devotion. And that is how, like, you should start even from buying the vegetables and fruits when you go to the market, and you should have that consciousness in you that you're offering this to Lord. So that was discussed yesterday morning, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji, for sharing. And even after you mentioned, I also recollected devotees mention this in great detail, that how from the point of view of when we are in supermarket buying the vegetables and other ingredients, we should be very mindful that this is meant for preparation of the offering for the Lord and not for our own enjoyment. Yes, correct. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you.
Any other point, any other devotees would like to share on this? Else we can proceed. So I'll just take another 5-7 minutes, then we conclude our discussion. All right, so we proceed to the next verse, which is 927. So the background to this verse is last multiple verses in different sections, including the 13-14 verse, where we saw the characteristics of the Mahatmas, including Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, Yatantascha Drudavrata, how these Mahatmas, how these pure devotees engage in devotional service to the Lord with great determination, and they don't have their attention diverted anywhere else. Then we also saw the verse 922, which was Ananyas Chintayanto Man, that how Krishna personally reciprocates with the pure devotees by protecting what they have and providing what they lack in their devotional service. And then we also saw the Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam verse. So all these verses, Lord Krishna is mentioning about the platform of pure devotional service. But not for everyone, this platform may be directly feasible. So for such devotees, Krishna is prescribing the process of performing any activity that we do in our life, offering the results for those activities and performing that activity as an offering to Lord Krishna. So we'll just read the verse and then we go into the details. Text 27. This is again a very famous verse from Bhagavad Gita. Yat karoshi yadashnashi yajjuhoshi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Translation: whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, And whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So here Krishna is mentioning the concept of Nishkama Karma Yoga, which means all these activities we do and we offer the fruits to Lord Krishna without keeping it for our own self. So specifically activities is mentioning the all the activities, whatever we eat, whatever we give away in charity, or any tapasya austerities that we perform, all of this should be done for the benefit, for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada starts the purport with a very emphatic line. He mentions, it is the duty of everyone to mold his life in such a way that he will not forget Krishna in any circumstances. That means even our work life, even our family life, we should arrange in such a way that we are able to remember Krishna while we are performing our other duties. Plus, we are able to make sufficient time for Krishna in our day-to-day schedule. So, Srila Prabhupada is using the word mold. That means if some of our activities are not conducive for remembrance of Lord Krishna, then we should try and mold them accordingly so that we are able to remember Krishna 24/7. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that all of these activities, that if anyone, one of us, we have to sustain ourselves in this material world, we cannot sustain without performing the activities for bodily maintenance, bodily sustenance. So therefore, it is better to offer those activities, offer that work to Lord Krishna. Like when we eat, we should eat only the food that is offered to Lord Krishna. So we eat only Krishna Prasadam. Any religious duties that we perform on different occasions, like giving of the charities, we should, religious duties, Srila Prabhupada mentions it as performing the puja, archana, performing the worship. We should perform it for Krishna. Any charity that we give, Krishna says, give it to me. And this Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport. This means that all the surplus money accumulated should be utilized in furthering the Krishna consciousness movement. So this is a very heavy statement, and depending on our level of surrender to Lord Krishna, we should at least take this as the ideal, that whatever surplus Krishna is giving us in our lives, we should use it for furthering the Krishna conscious activities, Krishna consciousness movement. And any austerities we do. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that people are very fond nowadays of performing various kinds of meditational processes. So which is practically speaking not ideal, not practical in this age. But if anyone wants to practice meditation on Krishna 24 hours a day by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra rounds on his beads, he is surely the greatest meditator and the greatest yogi, as substantiated in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Yoginam api sarvesham mat gatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samayukta tamo mataha. So such kind of meditation on Lord Krishna through the recommended means of chanting japa is very, very nice. And Srila Prabhupada also at other places names the austerities in this age, mainly the fasting on the special days like Ekadashi days, on the appearance days of the Lord. These type of austerities are what have been recommended for the devotees. And if you want to do meditation, then meditate using the process of japa. So if anyone wants to comment or wants to share anything on this verse, you can raise the hand. If not, we proceed to the last verse of our discussion today.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Yes, Shama Gopika Mataji.
Prabhuji, okay, is it right to say that in this verse 9:27, it is like referring to Nishkama Karma Yoga? So means whatever activities we are doing, if we are offering to fruits to Krishna, then it is a Nishkama Karma Yoga. But means so this is Nishkama Karma Yoga, and Bhakti means like whatever activities we are doing, that also we are doing for Krishna. What is the difference between?
Perfect, Mataji. So
yes,
you mentioned a very important point that is also, in fact, I had thought about it, but I forgot. So maybe Krishna just reminded. So this is also explained in reference to this verse by Gauranga Darshan Prabhu, that the difference between Nishkama Karma Yoga and Ananya Bhakti is that in Nishkama Karma Yoga, we are doing the activity according to our own setup, according to our own inclination, and we are offering the results, which is still not any less, it's still a very good platform. But in Ananya Bhakti, we perform the activities themselves according to Krishna's liking. So there the devotee molds his life in such a way that whatever is Krishna's will, whatever is his desire, we align our preferences, we align our thoughts to match Krishna's desires, and devotees act accordingly. That is considered Ananya Bhakti. So Yat Karoshi Adeshnashi means we do our activities, offer the results. Ananya Bhakti means we perform the activities themselves according to Krishna's liking, according to Krishna's preference.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you for reminding this point. And then we move to the last verse for discussion today. Result of Hare Krishna Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. This
Yes,
Nishkama
Mataji.
Karma, will it be equal to Karma Phala Tyaga, Prabhuji?
Karma Phala Tyaga, that means not accepting any results of our activities for our own satisfaction, but for Krishna's satisfaction. Yes, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you. Both are same then, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And one more devotee I saw, devotee had unmuted. Ramesh Prabhu, was it you? Yes, Prabhuji. Go ahead, Prabhuji. You want to say something? All right. So we proceed to the last verse of our discussion today. For our discussion today, result of offering every action to Lord Krishna. What is the result for such a devotee? Shubha Shubha Paler Evam Moksha se Karma Bandhanai Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mam Upashyasi. So here Krishna is mentioning the most important word in this particular verse is such a devotee Mam Upashyasi. Such a devotee ultimately attains Krishna, and Krishna also mentions such a devotee directly on the platform of sannyas based on Yukta Vairagya. So we'll see more details in Srila Prabhupada's purport. So let me just read the translation first. In this way, you will be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results, with your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation. Renunciation means renunciation from the results of one's activities. You will be liberated and come to me. That means we will attain Krishna if we perform work and if we perform all our activities and offer the results in this way to Lord Krishna. So such a person is mentioned as he will attain liberation, and Srila Prabhupada mentions in the subsequent part of the liberation, this liberation doesn't mean merging into the Supreme. This liberation means attaining the Krishna Loka, attaining the same planet and as Krishna and associating with the Lord. So liberation means freedom from the bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. So this is mentioned by Lord Krishna in the word Moksha se karma bandhane, means whatever are the good or the bad results of our activities, Krishna will absorb those and will give us spiritual benefit. And realization of Krishna, such a person will ultimately attain Vimukto Mam Upashyasi, will attain Lord Krishna and one will be liberated. And Srila Prabhupada also mentions in the purport of this verse as acting on the platform of Yukta Vairagya. That means there is a famous verse of Srila Rupa Goswami. We'll read the verse and then we discuss the purport. Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjataha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam Uchate. This comes in Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu 12255, where Srila Rupa Goswami says that as long as we are in this material world, we have to act, we cannot cease acting. Therefore, if the actions are performed and the fruits are given to Krishna, such actions are under the category of Yukta Vairagya. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhi, that means any facility, anything, any commodity Krishna has given in our life, when we understand its utility in service to Lord Krishna, then such kind of engaging that particular facility in Lord Krishna's service without renouncing it falsely, such engagement is called as Yukta Vairagya. That means it is the true kind of renunciation. And how does this process work? So Srila Prabhupada gives the step-by-step the qualifying criteria that first, when one engages in such processes, engaging everything that we have in Krishna's service, one has cleansing of his heart. So such activities clear the mirror of the mind, and then one makes progress, gradual progress in spiritual realization. And through such progress, one gains, one advances in one's surrender to Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. One attains the level of complete surrender, and then one attains the liberation. At the end, one becomes liberated. One comes to me. The word used by Krishna is Vimukto Mam Upeshyasi, indicates that the kind of liberation here mentioned is not Brahmajyoti, not merging into the form of the Lord, but entering Krishna Loka, entering the Lord's planet and associating with Lord Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in this regard, such a person who has no interest for any selfish gain, but one who dedicates one's life to the service of the Lord is actually a sannyasi. And such a person always thinks of himself as an eternal servant of Lord Krishna, totally dependent on the supreme will of the Lord for his maintenance, for his everything. And there are characteristics of such a person which are delineated, which are explained by Srila Prabhupada in the purport. Some of these characteristics are, such a person is Nishkam, he does not have any interest other than dedicating his life in service to Lord Krishna. Such a person is always having the attitude of servitude, always thinks of himself as an eternal servant to Lord Krishna, and he is completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord for the results, not relying on his own efforts, endeavors for the results. Beyond Vedic rituals, he does not give any serious consideration, serious attention to the fruitive activities that are prescribed in the Vedas. And such prescribed activities are obligatory, compulsory for all other ordinary persons. But for such a pure devotee who is completely engaged in the service of the Lord, they may sometimes may appear to go against these prescribed duties, but actually they are not breaching those rules and regulations. They are in essence, they are not going against the prescribed activities, although they may sometimes appear to ignore. Like there is a famous verse which was also quoted by Namanishta Prabhu a while ago in our discussion of the prayers of Madhavendra Puri, where he prays to his ancestors, to his Sandhya Sadhana 3 times a day, to his worship to the Devatas and to various superior beings, that please forgive me that I am not able to serve you nicely, because since the time I am engaged in the service to Lord Shama Sundar, that I am deriving so much contentment and satisfaction, and I feel this is sufficient for me. So I don't need anything extra than this reciprocation from the Supreme Lord. So such pure devotees of the Lord, although they may apparently tend to not attain to the Vedic injunctions in terms of the prescribed duties, they are not in breach of such Vedic injunctions. And one cannot externally understand the plans and activities of such pure devotees, like Srila Madhavendra Puri's example that we mentioned. Why? Because the Srila Prabhupada quotes in the purport from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Tanra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vigyena Na Bhujaya. That means by our own sense of logic and discrimination, we cannot appreciate, we cannot understand the activities of such totally dedicated personalities, great souls who are totally dedicated to service to Lord Krishna, why they are acting, how they are acting on their particular platform. These are very difficult to understand for a normal person. And what is the conclusion of this verse? Conclusion is that a person who is thus always engaged in the service of the Lord, or is always thinking and planning how to serve the Lord, is to be considered completely liberated even at present moment. And in future, such a person is surely going back home, back to Godhead. He is going back home, back to Godhead. He is guaranteed. He is above all materialistic criticism just as Krishna is above all criticism. So externally, such a person may not be fulfilling the criteria of this world, but because of his constant engagement in the service of the Lord, and Srila Prabhupada specifically mentions, even in his thought and planning, he is always thinking of how to serve the Lord. So such a person, for him, going back to Godhead is 100% guaranteed. So with this, we conclude our discussion. So if we are, so we have few questions, comment. Prabhuji, Ramesh Prabhu, sorry, we couldn't hear you earlier. Prabhuji wanted to ask how to remember Krishna during work and throughout the day post japa session in the morning. So I will just cover it based on what I have heard from the devotees, senior devotees. As far as work is concerned, we have heard from the devotees that we should, before we start our day's activities, we should pray to Krishna to have our consciousness as proper when we are performing our activities, and please accept whatever I am doing as a service to you. And I have also heard that when we are leaving from the work for the day and when we are coming home, we should consider each day as if we are resigning it and next day we are joining it again. That means whatever Krishna, the best I could try during the day, I did it for your pleasure. So you please accept it accordingly. And then we offer our work in that way. And secondly, even the work we are doing, of course, we cannot say that each and every one of us can remember Krishna at each moment. But even if we have that consciousness, have that prayer at the start of the day and at the conclusion of the day, still it's very nice. And secondly, I have also heard from devotees that if we start our day with a very strong sadhana in the morning and also reading of Bhagavad Gita, then the consciousness that we will have while dealing with the day-to-day situations, even if sometimes the situations are provocative, sometimes the situations are disturbing, we will be able to uphold the principles of how we should behave as a devotees much nicely if we have a very strong, good sadhana. And how to remember Krishna post the japa session in the morning. So basically at the time of japa itself, Srila Prabhupada has kept it very simple that we should try and hear what we are chanting, that, oh energy of Krishna, please engage me in the service of the Lord. So if we are doing this japa nicely, Srila Prabhupada mentions specifically based on the instructions of the previous Acharya, based on the instructions of Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada himself, and our own spiritual master, then definitely this chanting of the japa is performed as a service to the Lord. So this is my small understanding. I request other devotees also to share their realizations, their thoughts on this. Ankit Prabhu, you want to share anything on this? On
No,
how? Okay. Or any other devotee? Thank you, Prabhuji. Any other devotees? Aishwarya Mataji, I think there is one hand raised. Let me see which is the. I just saw a hand raised. Thank you, Prabhuji. So if there are there any presentations lined up today? I don't think we have Janaki Mataji, but from you, if a devotee has